Welcome back. You're watching Gravitas. Donald Trump has had a rocky start to his presidency. His ban on Muslims coming to the U.S. has been blocked twice by the courts there. He's under fire over suspected links with Russia. There's been a rise in hate crimes in the U.S. His grand plan to overturn Barack Obama's health care has been rejected by his own party men, the Republicans. With all that, Trump has had little to say about India,
because of the fact that it's Miss Universe in Moscow. It's a very great time.
Much less about South Asia. Barring, of course, H-1B visas. That is until a few days ago when he and Prime Minister Modi had a chat over the phone, a call which the Prime Minister's office in India promptly tweeted and talked about. But sources told WION that India is virtually starting from scratch with the Trump administration for a number of reasons. Starting from scratch, and why is that important now? The levels of awareness about India and the region are low in the new US government. India's importance to the US needs to be spelt out again for Donald Trump and his team. India is not clear where the US stands on issues vital to it. Officials in the Trump administration may not even have begun to think about India and their policy towards India. And this implies that India is not clear where it stands with the Trump administration. In public, of course, Foreign Secretary Jaishankar was reassuring. Take a listen.
Overall, our sense was that the administration has a very positive view of the relationship and a very positive view of India. I think it's natural that when any new administration comes in, they take stock of the progress made, you set new targets.
Two visits by National Security Advisor Ajit Doval have gone some way towards clearing the decks for engagement. An invitation from the White House for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to visit later this year is also in process. And ahead of that visit, high-level officials will travel between Delhi and Washington to work out the agenda. But there are vital questions that they're looking at. Critical here is the direction of the strategic relationship between India and the US. Trump's views on China, Pakistan and Afghanistan need to be taken into account and dwelt upon. The sale and transfer of sensitive defense equipment such as drones is something that India has to consider. The sale and transfer of military technologies also on the agenda, and also implementing the bilateral military logistics agreement. Only after there's clarity on these issues can forward movement be expected. And joining us on this is Jonathan Landay, National Security Correspondent at Reuters. We will also be joined by Dr. Harinder Sekho, Senior Fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation in Delhi. Good evening, Jonathan. Is the US even thinking about India and its policy vis-a-vis India?
Oh, I think that they are. I mean, witness the call that President Trump made to Prime Minister Modi following the parliamentary elections in India, the recent elections. And the fact that, at least in the American readout, the emphasis once again is on counterterrorism. I think that much is certain. I also think that, at least barring some kind of astounding development, I think you'll continue to see the United States pursuing what the Obama administration began, which was this increasing shift towards India, both in security and in commerce and finance. But beyond that, we're really not sure what the Trump administration has in store. The fact is that the administration has not, the president has not appointed any senior officials, as far as we can tell, or at least nominated those who would be senior diplomats or defense officials in charge of policy, guiding policy, determining policy, coming up with, the day-to-day direction of U.S. policy, not just towards India, but Pakistan, South Asia as a whole. Although we do know that the United States is very likely to send more troops to Afghanistan. But beyond that, it's very hard to say what direction this administration is going.
We've spoken to experts here in India and their understanding of how Trump's America sees its relations with India, and we are given to believe that the government is still trying to figure out the power equations in South Asia. We also know that the Chinese president is visiting the US in about a week's time in the wake of what was dubbed as the trade war. How should India be looking at these developments then?
Well, I think India may look upon one aspect of the discussions that will take place between President Xi and President Trump, and that is on counterterrorism, particularly Afghanistan. We know the Chinese have become increasingly concerned about the Taliban insurgency there and have been involved in diplomatic negotiations aimed at trying to get some kind of peace initiative going. But beyond that, we'll have to wait and see. You know that both sides are trying to understand where the other stands. I don't think there's any desire on either side to try and to look for to increase the challenges that they both face. You have, but Trump has been very clear that he's not happy with the way the Chinese have been dealing with North Korea. He holds them as perhaps the main leverage that on North Korea and trying to get North Korea to curb its nuclear weapons program. He's been very vocal about that. So it's very hard to say how this is going to come out. But at the same time, I think President Xi will be very interested in hearing what President Trump's intentions are vis-a-vis policy towards South Asia, and in particularly policy towards India. As we all know, the defense security relationship has been growing extraordinarily broad. I think that's going to continue, and I think certainly President Trump has talked about is pursuing what he called this America First policy, but he is also which could impact the transfer of American technology to India, but at the same time, he's also talked about how he favors bilateral trade agreements over multilateral trade agreements like the TTP, and that could actually hold some advantage for India if he indeed decides to engage more aggressively on the trade front with India.
It's interesting you brought up America First, and we'll take that up. Dr. Harinder Sekho of the Vivekananda International Foundation is with us. Good evening, Dr. Sekho. On more than one occasion, Donald Trump has called India America's friend and berated Pakistan. As Jonathan here said, that he congratulated Prime Minister Modi on winning an assembly election, which is rare for an American leader to do. But in the past 2 months, he's done nothing to suggest that his government and his administration are moving away from Pakistan and closer to India.
See, he promised a lot even during his campaign, and but at the end of the day, you have to see one thing, that Trump is an America First president. All of them are, but Trump is a businessman, and though during the campaign he did say that India is a country we could do business with, but there are certain inherent problems, and I think he's not taken any steps to address those differences. I've recently returned from Washington, and what we've noticed there is a complete policy paralysis. Donald Trump is facing huge challenges, and he's not been able to put his own team in place. And I think there are bigger challenges. India is considered to be a relatively safe country where relations are on an even keel, and it's not a problematic relationship. So we are going through a temporary, it's kind of a plateau period in our relationship. I think the bigger challenges which Trump faces are with China and with Russia, so there is a greater East Asia focus at the moment. And coming specifically to India, there are certain differences which I don't see how they would get resolved so soon. Firstly, we need to give him time. He's been there just about 2 months. But during these 2 months, the domestic challenges which Donald Trump has faced have been immense. And over the weekend, what we found was that his approval ratings have gone the lowest ever for a newly elected US president. They've gone down to as low as 36%. So I think in the face of these domestic challenges, it would be, you should not even expect that India is going to be a top priority. India enjoys bipartisan support in both amongst both the parties and also in Congress. But when it comes to the administration, the State Department, the Pentagon, the National Security Council, he is still putting his team in place, and I don't think there's going to be a course correction or a change in policy. It would be a continuity in US-India relations as we witnessed over the past 8 years of the Obama administration and also the 8 years of the George W. administration, which really saw US-India relations getting catapulted to a new high.
Right.
But the bilateral investment treaty in the economic sphere, I think trade, IPR issues and all are going to continue to dog US-India relations for some more time to come.
Sure, Donald Trump has been caught up in domestic challenges, but the fact also is that he is going to be meeting the Chinese president in about a week's time. Dr. Sekho, we also know that National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has made 2 trips to the US already in the past 2 months. What have they been about and what have they achieved?
I think whenever there's a new administration in place, it is but natural that you want to, you want to establish synergies and establish a personal rapport with the new team. And it's not just the National Security Advisor, the Foreign Secretary has made 2 trips there as well.
Yeah.
But the Ajit Doval first went and met the former National Security Advisor Flynn, and this time he went to meet McMaster because there is a new National Security Advisor in the United States. And it is something which, the US-India strategic and commercial dialogue which has been institutionalized. So security challenges which the United States and India face in this region, it is something which the 2 countries have been talking about, and it is natural for the 2 national security advisors to meet and our NSA to go there and apprise the new incumbent US NSA about the challenges and the US, because Trump had been talking about withdrawing from international arenas, certain arenas. And if they withdraw from Afghanistan, which is of critical concern to India, this is something which we feel we need to sensitize the new administration about. And as I mentioned that he is a businessman, and naturally he would look more towards establishing relationships where the economic interest of the United States is challenged. And that is why the greater focus on China and even on Russia for energy and the role Russia can play in the Middle East. So when it comes to India and South Asia, the region is seen as relatively easier.
Right.
So this is something which India needs to keep engaging with the new administration, and not just the new administration, the new officials who've come in, but I think even with the congressmen, the India caucus on the Congress on the Hill, you need to keep engaging with these people, and we need to lobby very hard to basically convey our concerns to Donald Trump and his team.
Right. Jonathan, a lot goes on in diplomacy and in diplomatic parlance, but for a layperson who's watching India and the US, what have we seen? 2 US congressmen have moved a bill asking for a ban on outsourcing. There's been a curb on H-1B visas. Nuclear and defense deals have been in limbo. How much should be expected from Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US later this year, whenever it happens?
As I said, it's very hard to say because we just don't know what most of President Trump's priorities are vis-a-vis Asia as a whole, not just South Asia, except for the one area, counterterrorism. India would be, as your other guest said, extremely upset if the United States were to continue its withdrawal from Afghanistan. That is not going to happen. There's a review going on right now by General Nicholson, the American commander in Kabul, about how many more troops he needs. I don't think there's any doubt that he's probably going to get them. But beyond that, we just don't know where Donald Trump wants to take the American relationship with Pakistan and the American relationship with India. I think, as I said, right now everything seems to be on autopilot, and the relationships as they stood on January 20th when Donald Trump took over the presidency will probably continue. One thing we know also for certain is the State Department is getting cut. American foreign assistance is getting cut. So I think you're going to see a diminution in aid one way or the other of an American aid to Pakistan
Right.
in the civilian sector, but on the security sector, we just don't know.
All right. We'll have to live with that then. We don't know as yet, and this is uncharted territory for President Trump. We'll wait and see how this pans out. Thanks very much, Dr. Harinder Sekho, Jonathan Landay. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time. We're taking a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the new face of anti-India terror in Pakistan.